Judge Franklin Thorne surveyed his courtroom with an air of bored authority, his gaze landing on the teenage defendant who stood awkwardly before the bench. The boy, Leo Reyes, couldn't have been more than 17, with a mop of unruly dark hair and a worn-out hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. He was accused of orchestrating a complex cyber attack on the city's municipal servers, a charge that seemed laughably out of sync with the clueless kid who stood shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Judge Thorne leaned into his microphone, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Mr. Reyes," he began, his voice dripping with condescension that echoed through the silent room. "You've waived your right to counsel. Are you sure you're equipped to handle this? This isn't a high school debate club. We use big words here." A ripple of stifled laughter went through the gallery. The prosecutor, a sharp and ambitious woman named Amelia Vance, barely suppressed a smile. She had a mountain of digital evidence, IP logs, and expert testimony. This was supposed to be a slam dunk, a quick conviction to pad her record. Leo looked up, his eyes meeting the judge's for the first time. There was no fear in them, only a calm, unnerving focus. "I believe I am, Your Honor," Leo said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I find the language of the law to be quite precise." Thorne's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Very well. Don't say I didn't warn you when you're in over your head. Let's get this farce over with. I have a tea time this afternoon." The spectators chuckled again as Prosecutor Vance rose, her confidence radiating through the courtroom. She approached the jury with the practiced ease of a seasoned performer. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice crisp and clear, "the evidence will show that on the night of August 14th, a sophisticated breach of the city's financial servers was initiated from an IP address registered to the defendant's home. We will present testimony from a leading cybersecurity expert who will confirm that the digital signature of the malware used is unique and was found on the defendant's seized computer. This wasn't some childish prank. This was a deliberate, malicious attack." The case sounded airtight. The gallery murmured in agreement, their eyes turning to Leo with a mixture of pity and contempt. Judge Thorne was already looking at his watch, but Leo just stood there, his hands in his pockets, listening. When Vance finished her opening statement, the judge turned to Leo. "Well, son, do you have anything to say, or are you ready to change your plea?" Leo took a slow step forward, and the entire courtroom seemed to lean in. "I do have something to say, Your Honor." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I'd like to move for a summary dismissal of the charges on the grounds that the prosecution's entire case is based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of network architecture." The room went dead silent. Vance froze mid-step, her smile vanishing. Judge Thorne, who had been slumping in his chair, sat bolt upright. He took off his glasses, polishing them slowly as he stared at the teenager. "On what grounds, Mr. Reyes?" he asked, the mockery in his voice now replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. Leo's lips curved into the faintest of smirks. "On the grounds, Your Honor, that the prosecution has mistaken a proxy server's relay IP for the point of origin. They haven't found the hacker. They've found the doorway the hacker used, and I'm about to prove I was just another person standing in the hallway." The judge stared at him, his mouth slightly agape. The tea time was forgotten. Everything was about to change. The courtroom remained in a state of stunned silence as Judge Thorne processed Leo's statement. He exchanged a bewildered glance with Prosecutor Vance, whose polished confidence had been visibly shaken. "Elaborate, Mr. Reyes," the judge commanded, his tone now sharp and devoid of its earlier amusement. Leo walked calmly toward the jury, his posture relaxed, but his presence commanding. "The prosecution claims the hack originated from my IP address. This is the cornerstone of their case, but what they failed to investigate is the nature of that IP address. It belongs to a public, unsecured Tor exit node that I happen to host on a partition of my home server." He turned to the jury, his expression earnest. "Imagine a public library. If someone uses a library computer to send a threatening email, do you arrest the librarian? Of course not. The librarian simply provides the access. They aren't responsible for what every person does with it. I am that librarian." Vance quickly found her voice, stepping forward to object. "Your Honor, this is a baseless analogy. The defendant is a known computer enthusiast. It's more than a coincidence." Leo didn't let her finish. "It's not an analogy, Your Honor. It's a technical fact, and I can prove it." He turned back to the judge. "I request that the prosecution submit the full unredacted server logs from the city's network, as well as the complete forensic image of my hard drive, not just the cherry-picked report from their expert." Vance's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, we've already provided the relevant data in our expert's report. Providing raw data would be a security risk and an unnecessary burden." Judge Thorne peered at her over his glasses. "A burden, Ms. Vance? Or an inconvenience? The defendant has raised a legitimate technical question. If your case is as strong as you claim, the raw data will only confirm it. If you refuse, it suggests you have something to hide." The pause that followed was deafening. Every eye in the courtroom was on the prosecutor. She knew she was trapped. Refusing would make her look weak, but handing over the raw data meant this teenager, who was clearly more than he seemed, would get to analyze it himself. "The state has no objections, Your Honor," she said finally, her voice strained. The judge nodded, a new, unreadable expression on his face. He was no longer looking at a clueless kid. He was looking at a genuine opponent. As they waited for the data to be prepared, Vance called her star witness, a cybersecurity expert named Dr. Alistair Finch. He was an older man with an impressive resume, and he confidently explained how he traced the attack back to Leo's machine. When it was Leo's turn to cross-examine, he approached the witness stand with a quiet intensity. "Dr. Finch," Leo began, "you stated that you found a unique malware signature on my computer. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's right," Finch said smugly. "And you're certain this signature is unique to the city server attack?" "Absolutely. It's like a digital fingerprint." Leo nodded. "Then can you explain why the same malware signature was reported in connection with the Triton II breach in Eastern Europe 6 months before the attack on the city servers?" Dr. Finch's smug expression dissolved into confusion. I'm not aware of that case." "You're not?" Leo raised an eyebrow. "It was the cover story of Digital Forensics Monthly, a magazine to which you are a subscriber. The article detailed how this specific malware was designed to be planted on unsecured servers to frame unsuspecting hosts. It even referred to it as the ghost in the machine. Leo turned to the jury. The prosecution wants you to believe this is a unique fingerprint. The truth is, it's a mass-produced rubber stamp, and it was planted on my computer. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Vance shot to her feet, objecting furiously, but the damage was done. Judge Thorne slammed his gavel, his eyes fixed on Leo. The boy wasn't just defending himself, he was conducting a masterclass. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed completely. The initial amusement was gone, replaced by a thick, palpable tension. Spectators who had come for a quick laugh were now on the edge of their seats, witnessing a legal battle that was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Prosecutor Vance, struggling to regain control, tried to pivot. Your Honor, regardless of the malware's origins, the fact remains that the defendant possesses a highly sophisticated computer setup. This is not the equipment of a typical teenager. She gestured toward a list of seized hardware. Multiple servers, custom-built rigs, encrypted drives. What does a teenager need all this for, if not for illicit activities? Leo stepped forward before the judge could respond. Your Honor, I'd be happy to answer that question. He addressed the jury directly. I use my equipment for several things. I run a free coding boot camp for underprivileged kids in my neighborhood. I contribute to open source software projects that protect journalists and activists from surveillance. And yes, I host a Tor node to help provide anonymous, uncensored internet access for people in countries where free speech is a crime. He let that sink in. The prosecution sees sophisticated hardware and assumes criminal intent. They look at my hoodie and see a delinquent. They see a young person of color and see a statistic. They have not seen me. They have only seen their own prejudice. The words hung in the air, sharp and indictable. A few jurors nodded slowly. Judge Thorne's expression was unreadable, but he no longer looked bored. He was watching Leo with a kind of fascinated intensity, as if seeing a rare species for the first time. The raw server logs and the forensic image of the hard drive were brought into the courtroom on a portable drive. Vance reluctantly handed it over. The court will take a 2-hour recess for the defendant to review the material, Judge Thorne announced. Vance shot up. 2 hours? Your Honor, it took our expert weeks to analyze that data. The judge gave her a cold look. Your expert also missed a malware signature that was on the cover of a magazine. Let's see what Mr. Reyes can do with 2 hours. When the court reconvened, Leo stood before a large monitor that had been set up. Your Honor, he began, in the 2 hours I was given, I found what the prosecution's team missed in 2 weeks. He displayed a string of code on the screen. This is the script from the city's server logs. The prosecution claims this shows the commands the hacker used, but if you look closer, you'll see it's been deliberately corrupted. He pointed to a specific line. This timestamp is digitally signed with an RSA 2048 key. But the signature doesn't match the log entry. It's a forgery, a sloppy one at that. He then pulled up another window. This is the true log entry, which I recovered from a temporary cache file on the city's own backup server, a file their expert apparently didn't think to check. The true log showed a completely different sequence of events. The attack hadn't just been routed through Leo's server. It had been initiated from a terminal inside the city's own finance department. A collective gasp went through the room. The hacker wasn't outside trying to get in, Leo stated, his voice ringing with clarity. They were already inside, and they used my public server as a digital smokescreen to cover their tracks. He turned to face a stunned Prosecutor Vance. Your case isn't just flawed, Ms. Vance. It's an illusion. And you brought an innocent person to trial while the real culprit is likely still sitting at their desk in the municipal building? Judge Thorne stared at the screen, then at Leo, his face a mixture of shock and dawning respect. The boy hadn't just poked holes in the case, he had solved it. The prosecution's case was in ruins. Prosecutor Vance stood frozen, her face pale as she stared at the evidence Leo had uncovered. The cybersecurity expert, Dr. Finch, who was still in the gallery, looked mortified. The entire narrative had been flipped on its head in a matter of hours. Judge Thorne cleared his throat, the sound booming in the silent courtroom. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Does the state have a response to this development? Vance stammered, shuffling through her notes as if the answer might magically appear on a page. Your Honor, it's highly irregular. We would need to verify these findings. This could be another form of digital manipulation. Leo responded before the judge could. By all means, verify it. The data is right there. Run the signature check, look at the cache file. Or you could cross-reference the internal terminal ID from the real log with the finance department's employee access records. I suspect you'll find it belongs to someone who has recently come into a large, unexplained sum of money. He wasn't just speculating, he was pointing them directly to the suspect. It was a level of investigative work that went far beyond mere defense. Judge Thorne let out a slow breath, pinching the bridge of his nose. He looked less like a judge and more like a man who had just witnessed an impossible magic trick. He looked at Vance, who offered nothing more, then at the jury, who were all looking at Leo with expressions of awe. Finally, his gaze settled on the teenager who had single-handedly unraveled a case built by the full force of the state. I think we've heard enough, the judge declared. He looked directly at Leo, a hint of something that looked like an apology in his eyes. This court finds that the prosecution has failed to meet its burden of proof. In fact, it has failed to even correctly identify the nature of the crime. He picked up his gavel, the polished wood feeling heavy in his hand. Case dismissed. You are free to go, Mr. Reyes. A beat of stunned silence was followed by an eruption of applause from the gallery. Leo simply nodded, a small, tired smile on his face. He packed his laptop into his worn backpack, the very picture of an ordinary student. As he turned to leave, Judge Thorne's voice stopped him. Mr. Reyes. A word Leo paused at the bar, turning back to the bench. The courtroom was emptying, but the judge remained, his robes seeming less imposing now. That was not the work of a hobbyist, Thorne said, his voice quiet and serious. You navigated my courtroom, my procedures, and the rules of evidence with more skill than half the lawyers who appear before me. Who taught you? Leo adjusted the strap on his backpack. I read a lot, Your Honor, and I believe in due process. He gave a small nod and began to walk away again. That's not what I asked, Thorne called after him. Who are you? Leo stopped at the courtroom doors. turning back one last time. He reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out a thin wallet, and from it, a pristine card. He walked back and placed it on the defense table for the bailiff to retrieve. The bailiff handed the card to the judge. Thorne looked down at it, his eyes widened, and he let out a short, sharp laugh of pure disbelief. The card read, Leonardo Reyes, Esquire, admitted to the State Bar, age 16, pro bono digital rights advocacy. The teenager wasn't a defendant playing lawyer. He was a fully licensed attorney, a certified genius who had passed the bar exam years ahead of schedule. He hadn't been in disguise. Everyone else had simply been blinded by their own assumptions. Judge Thorne looked up from the card, but Leo was already gone. Outside, the city air felt clean and sharp. Leo pulled his hoodie up, blending into the afternoon crowd. This case was never about him. It was about the system, about the ease with which it could target the vulnerable and the importance of fighting back with undeniable truth. The lesson here is profound. We judge based on what we see, age, clothing, background, and we miss the substance of who people are. The system is designed with blind spots, and it takes someone extraordinary to force it to see. Leo knew that the fight wasn't over. For every case he could expose, how many more went unnoticed? If this story made you stop and think, share it. Let's challenge our own assumptions and demand a justice system that looks beyond the surface. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and join the conversation. Because the next time the system gets it wrong, it might be someone you know.